Hello everyone, I'm Renan de Villiers. I'm the CEO and co-founder of OSS Ventures. We're a venture builder and investment firm, which means that we build and invest in SaaS B2B companies for factories.
SaaS B2B. It feels like
Yep.
that's a bit niche.
So SaaS B2B for factories, factory and operations are powering 25% of the world GDP. So we basically create and invest in the software that are for 25% of the GDP, which is a big niche. It's a nice enough niche.
So within manufacturing, do you have any parts that you are deeper into?
So we are lucky enough we are investors in 20 companies. So we are seeing a little bit of everything. I would say that we are very, very strong in automotive, aeronautics, transportation, so rail, trains, luxury, of course, being from France, but also consumer goods, agro, oil and gas, a little bit of everything, really.
Before we started recording, you were saying you don't just invest in these businesses, you work in them. They're your businesses.
Yep.
So that's not a typical model. How come you've ended up with this as your model?
Sure. So I sold my previous company, SaaS B2B in San Francisco, and I wanted to become an investor in SaaS B2B, but for factories. So I went back to Europe because I wanted to come back to Europe, and I called 400 startups operating in manufacturing. I basically called them all in 4 weeks, I think. So it was 100 calls per week. And I realized three things. It was back in 2018, 19. And I realized three things. The first one is it was all very expensive. Like 2 guys and a slide deck was 10 million pre-money. I was like, what the? So that was one thing. The second thing is most companies were taking 2, 3, 4 years to reach product market fit. So very slow cycles. There's a good reason for that, which is that penetration in factories was very slow. It takes 6 months for someone to say, okay, come to my factory, do your thing. So that was 2. And the third was the quality of founders, frankly, was lacking. Because a really great founder, they go to marketing, they go to finance, they go to basically all the things that they know or consumer. They don't go to create a SaaS for factories, basically. Yeah. And so I told myself after like 4 weeks, okay, so I want to be an investor in a field where basically there's no deal flow because I call them all. Companies are slow and founders are bad. This seems like a great idea.
Even if I'm not very good, I could be amazing with this group of people. Yeah, I'll stand out in this 400, even if, it's like that. Yeah, okay, I get it. I'm not saying you're not. I'm just saying it sounds like a plan.
Which seems bizarre because it's 25% of the world GDP. Out of the 20 biggest vendors in Europe of software, 11 are selling to manufacturers as a primary target. There is a huge revolution in putting software in factories. Like Tesla showed that if you put software engineers in a factory, you get 30 points cost advantage. And so it's just a huge market. Everyone wants the thing, but nobody does it in the right way, if you ask me. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to be an investor investing in companies that exist. I'm going to go to factories. I'm going to tell them, okay, what are your pain points? All right, if there is a pain point that you share with 3 or 4 of your friends, then I'm starting the company and it costs nothing until it works. And I'm going to hire the founders and I'm going to co-create the companies with them. So basically, instead of investing in companies, actively creating the companies, choosing the pain points and building them. And so it started 4.5 years ago, created the first company. That company is now doing 14 million ARR, having reached a grand total of 6.5 million euro. And we've created 20 companies. We are live in 2,200 operational sites. And we are doing 25 million ARR total, expected 40 by end of next year. So kind of works.
And you're still in Europe or you're back in the States?
So I'm located in Europe, but 20% of our sales are in the US, and it's the fastest growing geography. And there may be an announcement in the next 6 months of us doing something to come back to the US also.
But that you got to what you didn't say is you got to live where you wanted to live. And the bit of the jigsaw that we missed out, I think, that you and I talked about before we were recording, is that you used to be a director in a factory. So you didn't pick manufacturing. You didn't pick manufacturing randomly. It was sort of, how did you end up being a director in a factory in the first place?
It was actually pure luck. Because I'm from France, I got paid to study, which is very weird. And 1 month before the end of my studies, they told us, you have to pay it back. I was like, do I? And they say, yeah, either you become a public servant or you pay it back. So I looked at my bank account, and so I needed to be a public servant. So I worked for 2 years and 1 day for the state to pay back my studies, basically. And I told myself, okay, I'm never going to be a public servant ever again. So I need to be in the private sector. So if I need to be in the private sector, I need to be CEO, right? Because otherwise it's useless. So I search on Google and I put company that created the most CEO in the history. And there was McKinsey and Company. And I didn't know what consulting was. I didn't know McKinsey and Company, but I put a resume and I got hired. And my first appointment was in a factory because they told, okay, that guy is good at math. He's probably going to be good at supply chain and whatever. So I'm putting him in a factory. And so that was my first factory. And I just fell in love because I'm a nerd. And there is something that is very, very cool, which is there are only two things that are truly interesting in the real world. And it's tech companies at scale and factories, because those are the most complex systems in the universe. And it's just so interesting if you're a nerd. Like, you tinker with the things, you look at how it's done. And everything. So I just fell in love. So worked for like 4 years at McKinsey. And then one of the clients said, look, I have this factory. It's one of the most complex in the world because we are making high end watchmaking. And today we are doing about 16% of the production we should be doing. And in 3 months, we are probably going to stop selling watches if we don't get the production back to speed. And I was, okay, I'm loving it. Let's go. And so that was my first real like hands-on operational experience. And I just loved it. It was in Switzerland. I remember it fondly. I slept in the factory more than once, and it was just pure blast. That was one of the most cool experience of my
And
life.
so got paid to study, but didn't know you had to pay the money back, and then just sent a resume to McKinsey and got hired.
Yes.
So France is the place to want to work, to try to work for McKinsey. So is another low bar country, or
yeah, exactly. Probably. I mean,
and,
probably.
But then tell me about what you fixed in the factory in Switzerland. Like, because 14% of production's a bit shit, and obviously you fixed it, so they started making it. So
shit.
was it a manufacturing problem, or was it like a flow problem, or people problem, or?
So there were 4 major issues in that factory. The first one was lack of skills. It's very, very complex to assemble high-end watch. And there is a good reason for that, is that it is a lot of different know-hows. And if someone fucks it up at any part of the flow, you don't realize it until later in the process. And so it's multiplicative error rates. And so that's why at the end you get with 16%, because it just takes 2 mistakes in a 400 different component production system to not be able to liberate the watch at the end.
Yeah.
So it's cumulative error rates. So you need to be 99.99999 at each of the steps to, at the end, not be at 16%. So that was the first thing, lack of skills, and some of the processes were not mastered by the team. That was one. The second is the supply chain. Supply chain for watchmaking high-end is a shit show because it's a small industry. And so, for example, the dials, there are 2 suppliers of dials in the entire world. And let me say that if you want dials, you better say please. So when you have suppliers that you have almost no control on, it's very hard to do your production. So second was supply chain. The third one was internal organization of the flow, so material flow, how to be good at that, and blah 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 blah. And I would say that the fourth was the artisan mindset. There was no real people coming from manufacturing operations and like serious operations. There were only people from watchmaking, only experiencing 40% yearly growth for the last 10 years, and organized like glorified artisans. But you have to manage flows, you have to manage other things if you want to produce at scale. And creating something at scale in production is very different than producing it like 2 times. It's a
Yeah.
different skill set. And so, yeah, that was very interesting. I loved it.
And so, how long did it take to fix? And what did you get? What was the point at which
2 years and a half.
2.5 years? And what did you have to get quality error rates to for it to be break even? What was the sort of tipping point to say we'll keep making watches?
So we ended at like 65% of on-time delivery and 89% of 1 month delayed delivery, which was enough for the supply chain to be functional.
Okay. It's not perfect by any means, is it? 65% on time delivery.
Oh no.
It's like
yeah. I look at my SaaS B2B SLAs of 99.999 and I say, oh, what a beautiful world. But yeah. Um, I would say that there were two big moments. The first big moments was when I had my first week without a crisis. I would say it was like 4 months in, something like that. And so basically you put fires out each day, each week. Until 1 week, there's no real big fire. So you're saying, maybe I've run out of fires. And so maybe I'm finally starting to stabilize the thing. That was, 3-4 months in. And then 1.5 months in, one of our main clients came and visited the factory and said, okay, I see why your performance improved. And I was like, okay, that's the moment. That's the moment where we are starting to do it right.
Fab. And so then fast forward yourself back to setting up the venture business. Did you raise money to build the first product, or did you bootstrap it off the back of your earlier exit?
So I raised money from my previous exits. That was one of my most difficult conversations because it was a negotiation with my wife saying, look, we are going to invest half of what I gained in the last 5 years working like a dog, because usually startups in the field are dying and are bad and people lose their money, but I'm going to gain money. And so we are going to spend half of what we made in the last 5 years. So it was an interesting conversation, but because my wife loves me very much, she said, go for it.
Excellent. And where do you live now?
So I live in Paris, but I really live in a plane because I still do at least one factory visit every 2 weeks. And I usually go to Poland. I was in Boston last week. I go to Turkey. I go to UK, to the Nordics. I go everywhere in the world because I want to see factory shop floor. And so I have those very nice moments where usually now what changed is that it's the COO or the site director that goes with me. So it's very nice. But I strive to be connected with the shop floor and understand the actual pain points and how it's done.
Is that looking at companies that are using your technology, or is that talking to people who might have a problem for something else you haven't started yet?
I would say 70-30, 70 new clients potential.
Okay, marvelous. Well, still 24.9999% of the world's GDP to go for. So it's no need to retire anytime soon.
Some numbers for you. We are live in 2,200 operational sites in the world. There are 55,000 sites just in France, 450,000 sites in Europe, and 500,000 sites just in US, Canada, Mexico. So some time to go.
What's your take on the state of the economy and state of manufacturing and de-globalisation and China versus the rest of the world? What are you seeing? You're there. You're on the shop floor every day.
Yeah. One, decoupling from China has not been done yet, but the US is decoupling right now, so it should be starting to get live in 2 to 3 years. I have a stat for you with the IRA, which is the Inflation Reduction Act from President Biden. There will be more factories built in the next 18 months than in the previous 6 years. The US is starting to create chips on their soil. The US is reshoring, nearshoring, friendshoring. The Russian economy is now fully decoupled from the European economy. And the new iPhone will be made by Indian companies on Indian soil and not on Chinese soil. So what is happening is that there will be hubs of production with high cost being in the US, low cost being in Mexico, with high cost being in Germany, in France and UK, low cost being in Poland, and with high cost being in China and low cost in Thailand, because Chinese cost of labor is now not on par, but soon to be on par with other hubs. And so we are going to a world where economies are mostly decoupled, and production is going to be the thing. Another big subject is energy.
Yeah.
I always say that Gen AI spending on chips is higher than the spending on large language models. So Gen AI is hardware. Gen AI is chips and factories to build chips. We are working with NVIDIA. We are working with Novo Nordisk. We are working with a lot of people creating that. The bottleneck is the chip making, and there is a case where energy and creating the chips is more important than the software that you put. Everybody forgot about that, but Silicon Valley first word is silicon,
Yeah.
because it was actually hardware and chips.
Yep.
And so it's coming back, and I think a lot of people in the tech world are frankly underestimating how much hardware is going to be in the winning companies of the next decade or so. I really think a lot of hardware companies.
Well, you've seen that with Apple and Google making their own chips for their own
Yeah,
devices. And,
yeah,
you look at it and go, why would I pay NVIDIA? NVIDIA are in it to make money. If I make my own chips, I
yeah.
can keep the margin.
And Tesla created their own chip for self-driving. And this is a massive advantage that they have. And Stellantis, BYD, all those other automakers, it's not that they did not invest enough. They did not invest at all
Oh, yeah. Well,
on
yeah,
those
during
subjects.
COVID, because they outsource it, when the chip shortage hit,
Yeah,
there was nothing they could do because they
yeah,
couldn't rewrite the software or anything because it's like
exactly.
they had
Exactly.
no capability.
Exactly. And so it's going to be massively interesting. Unfortunately, Europe is talking about reshoring, but nothing really happens. But the US is massive. About 20% of the sales of all the startups are made in the US in my portfolio, and it's the fastest growing geography, like by far.
And the high cost Germany, low cost Poland, is that German companies opening facilities in Poland, or is it Poland native winning contracts at a lower price than previous German suppliers?
In the last decades, the world of factory and manufacturing went through massive financialization. And so you usually have some private equity group buying a bunch of factories, creating a big supplier, or big companies buying a factory and blah, blah, blah. An interesting fact is that less than 0.5% of all factories in the world each year are either closed or built anew. And so what usually happens is that you buy the company and you buy the factory and you change what's inside the factory, but you keep the bubble. And so there's not that much change in factory localization. There's a lot of change on the name of the paper of the shareholder agreement. This has massive change here.
And so overall increase in capacity. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fab. Well, look, let's talk about some scaling stuff because you're a founder. Do you say 25? You've started 25 businesses?
So I have personally started one business as a co-founder that I exited. And then as a builder investor, we started 25 projects and we have 20
Okay,
companies
so
live.
sometimes people do 1 or 2 or 3, but 20, right? And it's because you're in them, right? That sort of operator mindset builder is different from other VC firms because you have a deep specialist knowledge of how to run these firms. You might have a different view. I think complexity often comes with people rather than revenue. So often people start talking about revenue, and I'm like, the revenue's great, but if we just go to numbers of human beings, the management task and complexity of managing those people is built on sort of chunks of people. Where do you see any particular break points or inflection points as you're scaling?
Now we have roughly half of the companies that are on track to do 10 million ARR at tier 4. After that, we have one company that is on its way to scale to 50 million. But we are in the process of doing that one time. For the other ones, I have like 4 to 10 examples of each. We see 2 big breaking points. The first breaking point is when you go from product market fit search and ideation and still iterating on the concept and everything to creating a more repeatable go-to-market and product capabilities. So basically being from founder-led, no process, chaotic energy to people-led, processed, orderly energy.
Yeah.
That can be a breaking point. We measure in quarters. Our best companies are able to do that switch in 1 quarter. Our worst company, it's 3 quarters, and it could break the company at some point, if not well executed. That's the first big breaking point. And there is the second breaking point, which is when you go from manageable in terms of people, so 20, 30 people, 40 people even, but like a small tribe,
Yeah.
In a small tribe, communication can be done by tribal knowledge. In a small tribe, people generally like each other and you are aware of things because tribe communication goes well. When you go multi-office, when you go to 100 people plus, when you start and as a founder, you learn that some things are happening that you didn't know were happening and communication breakdown, and you have to write down processes and playbooks and blue books to explain to everyone, and you have to say the same thing over and over and over again so everyone gets the strategy in the first place. And you have to put exec and blah, blah, blah. This is a huge breaking point. This is also a huge breaking point because sometimes people who nearly work themselves to death working for you as a founder made the success of the company. They are not fit for that phase. And they don't want to deal with the fact that it is needed to change. And they have that they cannot let go of the chaotic energy of the company previously. And they tell you, the founder, that it's your fault and that the culture is slipping away. And no, my friend, the culture is not slipping away. It's just that you are not aligned with the new culture that is needed. And that is a huge breaking point.
And I see those people often, they were able to, you said they work really hard, as kinetic energy, that they're doing sort of 6 jobs okay. And now we get to 100 people. One of those jobs needs to be done like 5x better than they could do it. But they don't even want to get 5x better at it because they're great as a generalist. That's what their value is. That's why you hired them. That's why they were so important to the business early on.
2 days ago, in one of the companies that is really scaling, they raised a cool Series A, and they are scaling from 30 to 100 people in less than 1 year. In one of those companies, a very early employee went to the founder and said, "You hired this guy, and this guy made a PowerPoint presentation to explain his strategy. A PowerPoint presentation. We are losing the culture." And the founder was like, "Yeah, I kind of like that he did a PowerPoint presentation to explain what is going to happen." And yeah, that's a big breaking
And
point.
how do you because you're hiring these founders, are you hiring people with a view that they're going to have to run a 250 person business? or are you hiring people who've got the kinetic energy to get them past product market fit? What are you trying to do?
I'm hiring people so they can get to 10 million ARR, 80% growth, and 0% EBITDA. And then if they want to go fishing, we can hire professional CEOs.
Uh-huh.
But a lot of them, they want to stay. And I try to convey the message that this is going to be great, this is going to be a ride of a lifetime, but you are massively underestimating the personal change that you are going to have to go through. And at some point, this is very likely that you will be the bottleneck to your business. When I say that
They just
to
they just
founders
go
who
la
are,
la 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 la.
yeah, exactly.
They go, yeah, yeah,
I've
yeah,
been
yeah,
called,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. I've been called a checkbook with opinions by one of the founders because I'm the investors, right? But all the best founders that we have that are scaling and everything, they get it and they say, you know, that la 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 that you did at the very beginning of the company, now I get it. But now I'm only doing that at the very start of the company. So 2 years in, I can say, do you remember the 12th of October, 2 years ago, when we had that precise discussion? This is the conversation. You are the bottleneck to the business. Here are the data points. What do we do?
What are the challenges that you think? Oh, I mean, maybe it's different for different people, but are there any common challenges that in that, like, what got them here won't get them there?
Mm. So 70% of the founders that we work with have exited the previous business. The average exit for them is 3.4 million. So they have done one lap. I really like those profiles because they don't learn management with my money, basically. And so they just have some chops when it comes to creating a team, talking with clients, and everything. I see two very, very common challenge. The first one is having their first real good executive and managing executives rather than managing like direct contributors. That's really hard for them because you don't want to just close your eyes and say nothing, but you don't want to just step in and do everything the way you used to. You have to accept some level of change in the way you want to see things done, but you need to be in control. So yeah, it's hard. And especially for those founders who they built everything with us. They built everything, every single slide, every single screen, every single line of code in the first year was done by them and us. And so it's very hard for them to let go the founders type.
Does some of that challenge come from imposter syndrome? Like, this executive that we've hired knows more than me, is experienced more than me, and therefore, like, challenging them is going to be, it's the wrong thing to do.
So I have a lot of battle scars and I can put a price tag on almost all of them. So our most expensive mistake was one of our founders said, I have all those big accounts. I know that I can close them. I can have big contracts. But I don't feel legitimate enough. I need to hire a big hat executive. So he hired someone from SAP, $250,000 package. The guy wanted a car. The guy got a car. So 6 months in, and we realized that the guy was really good at SAP because he had like an army of people working with him and that he was able to do almost nothing. And so 250 divided by 2 is 125. So we spend $125K on nothing and we fired the guy and we lost some opportunities because the big accounts were badly managed during that time because the founder said, you're the expert, this is your thing now. And so onboarding top level, C-level executive and everything is now a core skill that we try to do with them. And so yeah, it's imposter syndrome because it didn't feel legitimate. He should have felt legitimate and closed the big accounts himself
But it's
instead of hiring some guy with a car.
yes, but that difference, that, like, there's no hustle at SAP, is there? That guy's never hustled.
No.
There's no sense of urgency. It's just,
Oh,
so
no.
wait, sorry, what's number two? What's the next challenge?
Yeah. Number two is I think it's particular to our industry. Um, we, I think, have become really good experts at revenue architecture, at architecturing the revenue. And so basically, for most startups, you need to go mid-market to get to your first 1 to 3 million ARR and then go
Yeah.
enterprise. But do not account for enterprise sales revenue before 12 to 18 months
Hmm.
minimum, significant revenue. And so you have to architecture the burn of your company with that kind of time frame and doing mid because you have short sales cycles on the mid account, so you do your growth there, but you will plateau your growth if you don't go enterprise. But if you go too soon in enterprise, you just burn money. So it's a really hard thing to do. But I think now we are quite good at it, at really being good at predicting the revenue and the quality of revenue and the speed of closing for each segment of clients and managing the product strategy with the revenue architecture.
Fab. That's magic. What have you done differently there around that revenue architecture? What are you doing? Are you going enterprise earlier?
We are going mid-market and just having maybe 10% of the sales efforts, just preparing some enterprise, just preparing them for 6 months, 1 year. And then we start having like 2, 3, 4 professional on enterprise because we now have the revenue from the mid-tier clients that let us pay the guys for zero revenue for 12 months. And then when it kicks off, so for example, the company that is now doing 14 million revenue this year, they will have added 8 million revenue. Out of those 8 million, 6 are enterprise clients.
You're really looking at the mid market, the cash flow, the sales team for the enterprise. So
Yes.
it's
But the salary of the people who got to the 6 million, they are paid since last year, and they are paid with the cash flow from the
yeah,
mid-sized clients.
yeah, that makes sense. I've got some quick fire questions for you. What drives you every day?
Impact. I am usually quite angry at how the world sucks in many ways. For example, when I was a factory director, when I was looking at my blue collars, their software sucked and their life was not good also because nobody catered to them. And I think it's absurd the number of tech workers going to their job every day to optimize some algorithm for pet food delivery. I mean, there are millions of blue collar workers working with Excel files and wasting millions of hours every year. It's years of wasted life. And I'm just angry at that. So I don't. It's probably not a good reason to wake up in the morning, but that's mine.
that's
And so yeah, that's why I wake up
that's
in the
fab.
morning.
I like that. What's your genius?
I think I'm really good at system thinking.
Okay. You just see the flow.
I almost never get an idea where it's a random ID not connected to anything. I always think in systems and saying, if we change that, it change that, we change that, which is awesome, and it will flow like that. And I have always had that kind of system thinking since I'm like a baby.
What unpopular opinion do you hold?
Um, I think if we someday upload all of human thought and personalities to a big computer and give up the whole body thing, it would be a good thing.
Okay. Okay. And you could live forever.
That's one added bonus, yeah.
Although playing football would be trickier, but you might think you're playing football, and then that'd be okay.
Maybe you're living in a simulation and you are already lines of code and you think
Yeah.
you're playing football.
Okay. What's the most significant risk you've taken in your career?
I think it was when I came to my co-founders and I said, I really, really don't think we should be doing that. And here is why. And I'm willing to exit the company if you don't agree with that. That was like, I was in Series B. maybe if I was getting fired, I was walking away with zero, and I did it anyways. And I ended up having a nice settlement and life-changing money, which was not the outcome I was looking for. But so yeah.
How do you measure success in life, not in business?
Impact. The total of solutions that we have are used daily by a little over 90K people. And I think their life is a lot better than without what we do. And so that's the thing. A life well lived is a life serving others with great impact, maximum impact.
If you think about your eulogy, what do you want to be remembered for?
I'm not sure I want to be remembered. Don't really think about those
Okay,
things.
that's fine. That's fine. What's the most recent thing you've learned or the most recent skill you've acquired?
So it was last week. I learned Flutter,
Uh-huh.
which is a dev language. And so it was a sort of personal challenge. I sat down with Claude, the Anthropic new AI, and I said, Claude, I know nothing about Flutter. I have one afternoon without the kids and the wife. Let's go. We are going to learn Flutter. And so Claude and me, we learned Flutter together. I put up together a very bad application where you can upload a PDF. Like you're a student, you can upload the PDF and an LLM is creating flashcard for you. I did that in 5 hours.
Fantastic. You are a nerd.
Yes, I am.
Where do you, what's your biggest source of inspiration?
If I say Elon Musk, it's just so cliche, but it's so true. I have the most admiration for people actually tangibly changing the world. So the guy who invented penicillin, the Steve Jobs, the guy who invented the TCP/IP protocol, all those people, they just really changed the world at scale. And I have the utmost respect for those
Okay.
people.
What's the worst business advice you've ever received?
So many. Uh, yeah, there was one. When I came back to France, I went to a venture capitalist and I said, I'm going to try to invest my money and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to invest in manufacturing operation. And he said, don't do that. It's niche. And it was actually the term he used. And fun fact, 3 years later, he was invited by some guy at the Ministry of Economy in France. And he was a speaker at a panel on reshoring, which I found so funny. I was like, yeah, you told me it was niche literally 4 years ago. And now you're holding a panel on the thing. And I was like, wow, that's.
Excellent. And last question, what's the biggest myth in business, do you think?
I think one in our line of work, venture capital, when people say ideas don't matter, I think it's bullshit. Ideas do matter. They're nothing without execution. And you cannot pivot your life away using some lean methodology and doing 1 week sprints. This is bullshit also. Ideas matter. And what you want from the world and the ideas that you have, it does matter.
That's magic. Where should we look for inspiration? What books should we read? What podcasts should we listen to?
I have one book that I read almost every year for 20 years now, which is Meditations by Marc Aurèle. So he's a Stoic philosopher.
Marco Aurelius,
And
indeed.
Marcus Aurelius,
Roman
exactly.
emperor.
Yes, and like the guy was the most powerful guy in the world, in the known world, at the time, and he was writing for himself on how to not be an asshole and live a life well lived. And I think it's really timeless and really incredible.
I agree with you.
Really love
I
that
love
one.
that. I have a rant at the minute, which is I keep reading posts where people say they've read Sun Tzu's Art of War. I mean, that's bollocks. I don't think they've read it, and if they do, it's not worth reading. Right? It's like here's some advice: if you're in a battle, don't lose. It's like obvious, but Marcus Aurelius, you just think this is the most powerful man in the world, and he's writing his own private diary. And here we are, a couple of thousand years later, we get to read it, and it is fantastic. As you say, don't be
Yeah,
a
and
dickhead. It's brilliant.
yeah, and it's actually, as all incredible books are, it's deceptively simple, but very hard to implement, and a lot of people are not implementing it. So it's, yeah, I mean, yeah. So I read it, yeah, once a year at least. So that's an awesome book. I recently read No Rules
Yeah,
Rules,
yeah, yeah.
which is the book, yeah, from the Netflix. Very interesting. I like the management style, and I like also the fact that he acknowledged that a lot of execution is a little chaotic, and you have sometimes to go with your guts, and you are allowed to be a human and have sentiments and feelings and everything. So I really really like that. And I recently also reread Hunger, Famine, and Wealth, which is a book from a London philosopher, which is how do you live your life wealthy when there is hunger in the world, which is a good question to ask yourself. And so basically, I'll save you 300 pages of very interesting philosophical conversations. It boils down to like one third, two third. You give one third of what you gain, and you keep two third to yourself because screw it. Yeah, it's sound, and I like it.
Very good. Do you listen to podcasts at all?
Yeah, I'm at 50 episodes out of 300 of Revenue Builder. That's incredible. Revenue Builder is the podcast for revenue and growth and everything. And it's done by the former revenue guy from
Yeah.
Snowflake. And did you know Snowflake is out from a venture builder? So Snowflake was created by a venture firm
Uh-huh.
called Sutter Ventures. So people like me, very much more successful, but people like me. This series of podcasts is incredible for anyone interested in truly groundbreaking revenue generation for B2B SaaS.
Fab. That's brilliant. Thank you for those recommendations. That's Mike, and it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you this afternoon.
Thank you so much.